Good morning. This is lesson 97 on ratios. So you know how I love my glossary. So a ratio is a way of comparing numbers using division. So let's say you went to the grocery store and you said, for every apple, my recipe calls for a pound of sugar. So my ratio would be 1 apple to 1 pound of sugar. Let's see, let's say I'm going to make cookies. I might say my ratio is 2 cups of flour and a half a cup of butter. So my ratio would be 1 to 1/2 cup of butter. Easiest way to think about it is kids in your class. And I know this isn't exactly how many kids are in your class, but you're lucky. If you did have 30 kids in your class and you had 12 boys and 18 girls, you can compare them this way using a ratio. So I could say, boys, I have 12, girls, I have 18. Or I could say, girls, I have 18, boys, I have 12. So I can write it in either order, but whatever comes first goes on top. So the book says, let me find it. If there are 12 boys and 18 girls in a class, then the ratio of boys to girls. Okay, because I said boys first, boys to girls, then my boys come first. So boys to girls. If I had said girls to boys, I would write 18 to 12. So that's really important to remember so you don't get your numbers mixed up. You can write it a couple different ways. They're using fractions right now. So this is a fraction, but it's also a ratio because I'm comparing two things, boys and girls. I can write it this way, the 2 in the middle, 12 to 18, the word to. Or I can write it with a colon in the middle, 12 to 18. You say it the same way, any way you write it. This is the way we're going to be writing it today, but I did want to let you know about the other ways. One way that helps you get it straight is if you make yourself a little table, just a really simple, easy, and I like to say thing and ratio. And if I write down boys first, then I know I'm going to find the number of boys, 12 boys. I put that here. And then the thing that comes next, boys to girls. So I put my girls underneath and write 18. It's not going to be as helpful now, but later when we get more complicated, it is really helpful to have a little chart. So that's tip number 1. Oops. Tip number 2, ratios are not written as mixed numbers. So if I have 16 over 12, that could be written if it was just a fraction as 1 4/12, right? But for a ratio, it's okay that I have an improper fraction. You don't reduce it to a mixed number, okay? So this is a new class. Now I have 16 boys and 12 girls. I don't know why they did that. They made it confusing. So think of it as a new class. The other piece of ratios, you have to reduce them to lowest or simplest terms. So here's my ratio. In this new class, maybe this is Mrs. Whitman's class. There are 16 boys and 12 girls. So the ratio of boys to girls is 16 to 12. Can't write it the other way because then you get mixed up. So they say, what's the ratio of boys to girls in Mrs. Whitman's class? And you would say, oh, the ratio of boys to girls, 16 to 12. Except it's best. And it's not necessarily wrong if you write it this way. Most of the time they like it in simplest terms. So thinking of it as a fraction, let's talk about the steps of reducing fractions. We're going to find the greatest common factor with a GCF. We're going to write our time divide. Here's my GCF equals line. Okay, so that's my little format. And then I'm going to divide the top and the bottom, numerator and denominator, by the GCF. So thinking about this, here's my ratio of boys to girls. And I want to reduce it to lowest terms. So the first thing is finding the GCF. So I have to write all the factors. Remember, factors are two numbers that make up. I can multiply together to get a product. So these are the factors of 16. 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. You can also write them, let's see, 1 and 6, better do it up here. 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. So if you want to list like that, you could do it that way as well. So I've got my factors of 16, my factors of 12, and I look to see which is the biggest number that that's in both lists. That's a factor of both 16 and 12. 1's in there, but it's not very big. 12 is not in that, 16's not in that. 2's in there, but it's not very big. 8's not in there, 6 isn't there, 3's not in there, 4. So 4 is the greatest common factor. The biggest number that's in both lists is 4, okay? So I'm gonna write my bar, divide, box equals line. So 16 twelfths, this is my greatest common factor here. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So when I reduce this ratio to lowest terms, I find for every 4 boys I have, I'm going to have 3 girls, right? So that's my ratio in lowest terms. I actually have 16 boys and 12 girls, but if I have it in lowest terms, maybe the whole school had the same thing and I could figure out how much the whole school was. So ratios, lowest terms, don't forget you don't turn that to a mixed number. If they say boys to girls, you're always going to put the boys on top. If they say dogs to cats, so the dogs would go on top. So be careful to keep them in order, and that's really important with ratios. There was a lesson practice, hold on, that I wanted to tell you about. Let's see, can you see it? Yeah. What was the ratio of jackrabbits to prairie dogs? Okay, so be sure which one goes on top. The jackrabbits, right? And the prairie dogs go on the bottom. But on this one, it's the same ratio, but they flipped it around. So prairie dogs to jackrabbits. So which one goes on top? Yeah, the prairie dogs and jackrabbits go on the bottom. So make sure and use your chart. If you don't want to use a chart, at least make sure you've got them in the right order. Do the same thing to Red Sox and Blue Sox and put the ones that they ask for first, Red Sox on top, Blue Sox on the bottom. Got it? Okay, good luck, you guys.